Okay, so this week's course content, we're looking at gender, the body, social media, and post-feminism, and we're joined by Julia Coffey again for all of the parts this week. We're going to begin by looking at notions of post-feminism and ugly feelings and show some examples there around body image stuff. In part two, we're looking more at the notion of wellness, and then part three, looking at most recent work on selfies. So, tell us a little bit about the kind of concept, I suppose, of post-feminism.
So, yeah, post-feminism is a term that feminist sociologists mostly have come up with to describe the current moment, or I guess from around the 90s onwards, which was, I guess, stemming from a lot of the liberal feminist or third wave type of dimensions of feminism to describe I guess the contemporary time where the narrative in popular discourse started to become that feminism has done its job.
Yeah.
And the first sort of inklings back in the 90s was that feminism actually maybe has gone too far.
Yeah.
It's done its job, but actually now it's tipping over and now harming boys.
Yeah.
There was like a whole lot about the boys' discourse around schooling and so, you know, from the 70s onwards, young women entered higher education in huge numbers, entered the workforce in much higher numbers. There was a big shift that occurred after the second wave of feminism. And then sort of off the back of that, the backlash around the 90s sort of led to this, what now feminists were calling a post-feminist moment, which is that we're past feminism, it's gone too far. Women are great now. They've got everything they need. They're doing really well. There are no structural barriers anymore. They've all, everything's finished.
Everyone's been emancipated. Yeah,
everyone's emancipated, and so feminists using this term post-feminism used it to describe all of the ways that women's lives were still being constrained by gendered inequality, but just in ways that were actually harder to see because of the empowerment discourse.
Yeah, it's really important to point out that the post-feminists aren't arguing for post-feminists in this sense. No. It's not a term that people use to say that's the case, is what's happening. It's a critical term to say, well, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
In fact, there's all this other stuff going on. Post-feminism is just a discourse to kind of, in a way, make blurry what is actually still a lot of structural constraints. So, yeah, it's been publicly kind of critiqued a lot around that kind of lean-in kind of feminism. Tends to be the avatars of it tend to be like rich, white, middle class women, with a lot of privilege that will kind of look at aspects of that throughout the rest of the thing.
Yeah.
So, okay. And it's like, it's a really common figure in pop culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, you know, a lot of the kind of key main female figures, I think, in most movies, for instance, are often kind of post-feminist kind of figure in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Usually if someone's positioned in the narrative as being empowered and, you know, succeeding in a man's world and, although they will often be, I guess, visibilizing that. And it's usually, post-feminism is a critical term to describe current or continuing inequalities where there are meant to be none anymore. So it's not a different wave of feminism at all. It's a word to describe a contemporary moment where actually it's harder to talk about gender inequality because of the new visibility of women in public life, for example. But I think there has been more of a move to talking more about feminism as being something that's actively required, perhaps since Me Too. But that's a whole other lecture.
Yeah, true. So in the lecture today, we look in a way looking at three almost like objects to think about post-feminism through: the body, wellness culture, and selfies. So your work for a number of years has been using this concept of bodywork. So you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So bodywork is, I guess you can really define it as being the physical work that people do on their bodies and appearances to present, it's really identity work. So to present who people are through their bodies, through their appearance. I've been particularly interested in how body work usually intersects really clearly with gender as being a way that people visibilize their gendered identities through the particular ways they present their bodies. So, and one of the main ways this connects with feminism or post-feminist ideals is that bodywork practices really do come down to gendered relations. So people would talk about, in my earlier work, we talk about, you know, I want to look like this, like a particular, often masculinity way, because it would link to, you know, concept of strength and wanting to show that they're powerful, and it would just sort of, gendered relations would be just under the surface for whatever reason. People had to look a particular way related to femininity or masculinity and all kinds of things. It would link with the broader gendered ideals that would reward particular identities and subject positions.
The horizon of value.
Yeah, the horizon of value. And that's particularly the case for young women. So, you know, bodies and bodily appearance, body work matters particularly for young women because bodies have traditionally been a key source of value for women. And that hasn't changed. That certainly hasn't changed since, you know, and women entering public life or entering university. There's been a huge kind of revolution that's happened with gender, but and, you know, the kind of roles that women have in society, but there are others that are really intractable and have not changed. And that's, I guess, one of the paradoxes that McRobbie talks about with post-feminist, you know, femininities, is that there's been all this change, but then there's also been so many things that have not changed. And the body's significance as, you know, being attractive and as being one of the key modes of power or of value for young women. And like we spoke about with the work on effective labour, it's so contentious because it's not just ever this sort of simple empowerment where, oh, you know, things are great now, because it always comes with all of the gendered power relations as attached to it, which will kind of negate straight away. You need one thing to change it. We're just going to flip everything to be back to, you know, the most straightforward example of gender inequality.
Yeah. So like as more women come into higher education and the workforce, these other pressures aren't kind of declining in some kind of zero-sum game. They're kind of piling up on each other. So there's like a second shift, but like there's a third shift and a fourth shift of all these kind of different things.
Yeah, exactly.
So a key way of thinking about the relationship between body work and these kind of more broader societal pressures is from Sienna Guy around ugly feelings. So can you explain this? So, and I suppose what we're doing here in these first 3 slides is setting up the conceptual underpinning for things we'll look at throughout the rest of the lecture. Yeah.
So I really liked this. I came to this idea of, or to use this framework of ugly feelings because I won't go into all the background, but because I'm wanting to look at the significance of embodiment as a social practice, as a social phenomenon. I wanted to, like many other feminist scholars before me, look at the actual, you know, embodied sensations or embodied aspects of experience that aren't just sort of, you know, discourses or brain, how you understand the body, how we analyze society. I wanted to center feelings and embodiment as part of that. And I thought the descriptive kind of language that Nagai uses, I just felt like it really worked to be able to get at some of those additional embodied sensation things. So to describe the feelings, and not just feelings as individual sort of personal things that are private, but as these feelings as being important because they connect us to societal and cultural forces. They're shared, connected, relational feelings rather than just personal kind of psychologized ones.
Yeah, so, and this kind of relates to kind of broader cultural studies and kind of understandings of emotions. That emotions aren't individual, they're social and cultural.
Yeah, so we feel them, we register them, and they are subjective. We can name them, but they're not just, they don't begin and end in the body as an atomized, you know, separate being. Yeah,
they're relational to other things, whether that's other people, other norms, other expectations.
Exactly. And the ugly feelings framework in particular is useful because she locates these feelings as connected to, or I guess part of the circulation of feeling in capitalist or late capitalist society. So anxiety, envy, paranoia, irritation, these are all very sort of capitalist results, or the feelings are very much related to those conditions. So the injunctions of capitalism and neoliberal society to work on the self, improve the self as an individualized, responsible subject, which is the ideal worker, right?
Yeah.
She said that, yeah, she says these ugly feelings are very understandable and the pretty straightforward result of having to live in these paradoxical conditions. And I think particularly useful to help think through some of the post-feminist framework that McRobbie's thinking through. And those paradoxes or contradictions that people have to somehow position themselves in, or young women, particularly in the work I'm doing, have to somehow, understand that it's really important to present yourself in the best possible way, because there's value, real value attached to that, whilst also being critical and feminist about it, and also being told, but you have to be confident, you have to love yourself regardless. So there's so many tensions and contradictions, I guess, at the heart of contemporary heterosexual white femininity. Particularly, that's where lots of the analysis has happened previously. And this is a good framework for it.
She's kind of breaking down the different components of like temporary alienation in different, and kind of allowing us to kind of have a more detailed look, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to look at some of your research participants and empirical data here. So tell us a little bit about what we've got here.
Yeah. So in this paper on ugly feelings, I was starting to, I guess, locate or analyze, trying to look at the specific feelings that were going on in relation to body work, body concerns. So the kind of most common ones were around just worry, or just in the really mundane, I used photo voice as a method for this. So this is a photo a participant took and allowed me to use in the research. I asked them to, take a photo when they were thinking about the body or wellness or anything to do with what it feels like to think about these things. And this is a picture that a participant took, and she was like, oh, this is actually it. I realized I was looking in the mirror, and I was like, oh, I should take a photo of this, because this is what it is. This is just this kind of always under the surface, not like for this person, it wasn't a huge sort of burden of body concern, but it was just sort of a just under the surface, kind of very mundane aspect of everyday life of worry.
Everyday frustration and self-criticism.
And I thought this was an interesting or a kind of surprising example, because Cara linked it specifically, the kind of feelings of worry or self-criticism and the relational dimensions of them. So she would talk about it in particular if she hadn't got a shift at work, she worked in a casual retail setting, she got looked over for a shift. She's like, why didn't I get that shift that week? And then she would in the next breath talked about how she would just immediately sort of find herself looking in the mirror and sort of judging herself and turning that inwards to be like, okay, right, I've got to lose some weight. And it had nothing to do with her work, physical appearance. It was nothing related to her actual job, but it would be just this feeling of wanting to turn inwards and control, work on the self, as one of the few modes of control that are available.
So I think that's a really important point, and we'll probably talk about this in more detail in the part later on selfies, is that the apparent female obsession with the body, or the narcissism of taking selfies, is often seen as like narcissistic. It's a problem. Young people today, what are they worrying about this stuff for? But what your research is kind of showing is these are actually expressions of anxiety about the world, kind of enrolled back towards doing something about the self to try and deal with those problems. This is kind of weird feedback loop that happens in this kind of situation. That's not narcissism. It's actually expression of, worry and precarity and anxiety, rather than this kind of obsession of self.
Yeah, exactly. Turning inwards and back into the only form of control one can have sometimes.
And this is essentially because, from kids we're told you have to make the right choices, otherwise your life's not going to turn out very well. It's kind of natural is the wrong word, but it's like a very understandable kind of way of thinking about this. If you're told from an early age that you've got to sort out all your problems as an individual, like you're obviously going to turn yourself to think about that.
If everything is always in your hands, in your control, which is what neoliberal capitalist subjectivity says, then you're wholly responsible for everything. even the things that you can understand logically are not in your control.
Yeah.
But it just creates this flattening out of inequality, which is really problematic.
Yeah.
Yep.
So here Laura's talking about judgment as being felt.
So I guess this felt judgment is one of the, I guess, potential hinge feelings that is starting to get further down the line of ugly feelings as being more acute or intense. So she was someone who felt like everywhere she went, she was constantly being judged, or that other people were appraising her food choices all the time. She would avoid buying chips or ice cream in the shops, even if she really felt like those things, because she felt like the cashier was going to judge her. And she said she was sort of aware, again, reflexive of knowing that this probably wasn't going to happen, but already had all those thoughts and ideas about, and the anxieties had been worked through in her head so much that she was like, I know they're probably not, but I still have to I have to do this anyway.
It's kind of weirdly panopticonic, but like not really in the Foucauldian sense. It's kind of a So from concerned kind of to worry, now to disgust.
So not often, participants wouldn't all have all of these full range of ugly feelings themselves, but I guess I could see all of these as being comprising, I guess, a particular
spectrum in a way.
Spectrum of femininity, of feminine, ugly feelings. Very much related to the importance of the body for young women. So Mackenzie was a professional or a semi-professional soccer player. So, very high level as well as a uni student. But she talked about being disgusted by her legs and parts of her body that were absolutely, central to her being, a pro at her sport. And she said she talked about it with her teammates as well, though most of them had a similar thing where they would really dislike parts of their body because they were outside of what she saw as the realm of conventional femininity. But I mean, these things are so narrowly prescribed and defined. And so that kind of pinpointing and that feeling of disgust was really like one of those real vortex kind of intensive feelings that would pull from the theory framework, pull them into a affective relation that was really hard to get out of, and it would actually be quite consuming. And really start to limit the kinds of ways that people live, and really constraining possibilities for life or for being able to just go about your day,
Okay, and so and here we're kind of moving towards a kind of notion of how these are kind of struggles, like what you're kind of talking about there, really, this kind of how people can actually deal with this.
And people use such affective language. So the reason I really like using affect as a theory, and this connects to what I was saying at the beginning with ugly feelings, is that you can really understand what someone's going through if you are able to kind of, I guess, focus on the relations that go with a particular practice. So you're not looking at it from the outside and being like, oh, that's ridiculous, why would you be worried about that? If someone is describing how they get, just how a certain feeling will pull them further down the line, and they will talk about just being swallowed into a hole. That's some of the language they use. That's such affective language. It's often kind of literary, or it'll be symbolic or kind of abstract metaphors, but they're so powerful, I think, for describing experience, and this is the words that participants use for it. So I think it's really important to look at these feelings to be able to make sense of a relational, social, cultural practice that isn't just purely rational. But you can't understand it if from a purely rational point of view.
And the problem with that kind of dichotomy, like when you say it's not purely rational, people say, oh, whether it's emotional, therefore it's not real, or it's not worth worrying about. It's just like feelings, but like the way we feel is what we are.
Exactly. And that's the case for everybody, right? So feelings and embodied feelings are really crucial to how we go about the world, how we make decisions, how we, present ourselves and how we live. So
it's not an accident that, like, rationality is seen as the way to be and emotionality not, because it just maps onto patriarchy essentially in terms of how things work.
Exactly. And feminist sociologists have talked about the body being marginalized for so many, throughout the beginning and all the way through philosophy, really, until feminism. It was always sidelined for precisely those reasons, and because it was coded with women. Women were already marginalized and seen as being inferior, so anything related to women became inferior.
So women associate with the bodies and emotionality, and therefore it's less valued, and it's kind of self-fulfilling prophecy in the end in terms of how problems are treated. And this, we can do a whole course on, say, the medical profession around these kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, let's quickly sum up this section. So we've kind of done that, I suppose, already, just what we were just talking about. The ugly feelings can kind of help us understand the life world and how and why these things matter. Rather than just kind of writing them off as kind of personal concerns. It allows us to connect the personal to the kind of wider political, social conditions.
Yeah, exactly. And this is particularly important if on a topic like body image, which we'll talk about in the next section more, because it is so coded as a personal, individual problem. Like if you've got bad body image, you just need to change. You need to change your thoughts about your body. That's basically the advice. But if we don't understand the significance of the affective attachments going on, and also the broader political context, which requires particular attachments and rewards them, then we're really not understanding the problem, and that's why we're not making any progress.
And now we'll talk about, like, an industry built around this stuff, I suppose.
Exactly.